On this episode, we discuss Daniel Bryan's announcement, the Ascension's debut, Cesaro and Ryback's promos, and is the Authority back already? All of this and more now on Byte That. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 71 of Byte That, the semi-somewhat, maybe, international professional wrestling podcast where we talk about the ups and downs of that which we love, which is you long time. My name is Ryan McNulty. I'm taking over this week for Juan as host while he is on his honeymoon, and with me from no longer the double F can get the F out because he's from Winnipeg, you idiot.
Oh God, indeed
Mr.
they can.
Keith Poshik. How you doing, Keith?
I am so impressed by the fact you just fit two things in there. Just like rapid fire, like boom,
two
boom,
WWE
boom.
catchphrases in there. I try.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But it's good to be back. Had a nice 2-week vacation. The holidays are crazy. Thank whatever God you believe in, it's over. And I'm just happy to get back to it.
Awesome. Yes. The past 2 episodes of the Byte That podcast were recorded in video while I was down in Puerto Rico visiting Juan for his wedding. If you want to check those out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast. They are our special video editions of the podcast. We're back to the old format. It was fun to do video, but unfortunately, we all don't live in the same area. But we're back to, doing what we do best.
Exactly.
So, Monday Night Raw. Last Raw of the year. I gotta be honest, my expectations were pretty low. So before we actually get into how we felt about Raw, I kind of want to get your thoughts on what your expectations going in.
I mean, they were roughly as low as they could possibly be. The last couple weeks have just kind of all been stinkers, and it didn't really set a good precedence for this week's episode. But I'm happy to say that it kind of blew my expectations out of the water. It was actually a really solid show. Yeah,
exactly. There was a lot of things going on in this episode. I really didn't expect to have so much to talk about, but it's definitely a treat. And the first thing I want to get to is Daniel Bryan. So going into this, we were told Daniel Bryan is going to come out. He's going to make an announcement about his the future of his career.
His future.
So we've had these reports for, months now. Daniel Bryan's been out since, I believe, Extreme Rules. And we've just heard reports, he's got to get a surgery. Oh, now he doesn't need a surgery. Now he needs this surgery. He still doesn't have strength in his arm. So, there was a lot of question marks, and we really could have felt that things could go either way with the state of his career.
So it's kind of funny because all along we said one of two things were going to happen. Either A, he was never going to wrestle again, or B, he was going to return at the Royal Rumble or sometime around it. And funny enough...
I didn't know you were just going to stop there. But that's okay. So... He announced, first of all, he gives, I'm going to say this is probably the best promo I've ever seen Daniel Bryan give, because his heartfelt. We know the journey he's been on. He's had a lot of ups and downs. Just the journey to WrestleMania 30, winning the championship. Then he gets married in the same week. His father passes away shortly after this. Then he has the injury that, silenced him for months. So everything he was saying, you really felt like came from the heart. He was obviously getting emotional. And then he kind of gave us this little cliffhanger for just a few seconds about whether or not he was actually going to wrestle again. And, the thing about this situation is we've been kept in the dark for so long that it was believable that either scenario could occur. But luckily, we know that Daniel Bryan is officially going to be in the Royal Rumble. And this is huge. So I assume, that will be his return match and hopefully back to a full-time schedule.
I would hope so, but I think the question that's kind of looming is what happens now?
As far as who's winning the Rumble, or...
Like, just everything. Like, where does Daniel Bryan fit back into this WWE?
It's true. I mean, he's been gone so long. As soon as he left, the whole Shield split happened, and, it's no small coincidence that did happen at that time. So we haven't seen Daniel Bryan in this environment yet with the, the singles wrestlers of Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns, who are all basically top guys now kind of in the mix. But, they have some time to integrate Bryan kind of back into the roster. There's still a couple weeks before we have the Royal Rumble. I'm sure if he doesn't win the Rumble, then they might plant the seeds for what he's doing at WrestleMania. I know he's just kind of coming back right into Mania season, and we have no idea.
Like right in the thick of things.
You got to put him in a match, but you can't even begin to speculate. It's really a completely open book. It could be, someone like Rusev. He could be in a multi-man match. It would be kind of unfortunate if he was in, something like the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. I think,
or maybe they put him with Sheamus.
Maybe they put him with Sheamus, and they get to do that match that they wanted to do last year. But it's so open right now.
Do you think we see Daniel Bryan versus Lesnar?
I don't think it's gonna be the WrestleMania headline match. Would I be upset with it? No. I think it would. Mm-hmm. It would be a very interesting match. I don't know if I like Bryan's chances in it, but he's a potential winner of the Rumble. I mean, guys who come back, those return guys. Batista came back last year, won the Rumble to much fanfare.
Exactly. Couldn't have put it better myself.
So, we really don't know. And so I kind of want to turn it over to our audience and just ask before we move on, Keith brings up the interesting point of where does Daniel Bryan kind of fit into the current WWE, slate? What feud would you like to see him going into, heading towards WrestleMania? What WrestleMania match do you want to see? And what are his chances for the Royal Rumble? Let us know what you guys think. So there was a lot of interesting promos this week on Raw. I think that
it was kind of open mic night.
I think that is the best way to put it. Really, it was completely open mic night, and we're gonna move on to the next man on the mic, and that is Mr. Ryback. And this was a very different promo for Ryback as well. Everyone actually had kind of a new twist to their character with these promos. And Ryback basically giving his life story, and I'm not trying to say that as an insult either. He was actually kind of giving a background to who he is, which is something we haven't really seen yet.
It's weird because there is no really background to it or what's going on with it, but it was out of nowhere, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It adds a new angle to this whole Rusev thing. Like, it's not just, oh, America anymore. And Ryback just straight out said that at the end of it. It's interesting.
No, I like this. I mean, I think with a Ryback-Rusev matchup, just kind of the physique of these guys really sells the match. They don't really need to bring in the whole USA versus Russia thing. But sort of going back to Ryback's story, was he just on Jericho's podcast, maybe? I think he was just on Jericho's podcast.
He was just on Jericho's.
I was just listening to it a couple weeks ago, and it's literally, he tells that same story, obviously a little more in depth on Jericho's podcast. So I don't know if that's what maybe almost kind of influenced this promo, because, it was a lot of parallels in the things he said, and maybe this, going on the podcast kind of inspired him to, come out to the WWE, not in that way, but to tell his story.
This isn't Darren Young on Jericho's podcast.
But to basically say who he is besides just the, I'm going to beat people and say, feed me more all the time.
Plus, it's kind of like an anti-Ryback thing, because that's one of the biggest critiques people have always had about Ryback, is he's a very shallow, kind of character. And it was one of our biggest worries when he came back, is that he's going to go back to that. But obviously they're not doing that.
Exactly. That's cool. It gave us some depth. We got a lot of depth to a lot of characters on this episode of Raw. I don't know who wrote this week's Raw, but it definitely had a different feel to it than we've had in the past. So let's jump back into the whole Ryback versus Rusev thing, because there is sort of this situation with these two guys where it's like, who can really lose here. Both of these guys, are in a scenario where they're being pushed heavily, and they neither can really afford a loss, especially Rusev. So what do you think, Keith?
I was thinking about that as well, but the point that kept coming back to me is how many of those situations have we come across in the last year that ended like with nobody coming out on top. It was just kind of like a stalemate holdover. But not even that, because think of like Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins. Neither of them could afford a loss, and neither of them got a clean loss. So
yeah, and even much of the whole, kind of being booked into corner scenarios. You see that a lot with Ryback. That seems to be a theme. I mean, that followed him for a solid year of him losing pay-per-views. So I think we're going to have to expect some sort of wonky finish, or Ryback is probably going to lose, and that's not really a good thing for a guy you're trying to push. So, we kind of want to get your thoughts as well on the Twitter or whatever, as to who can actually win in this scenario.
Are they still pushing Ryback though? Because he's definitely gotten colder since he's come back. Like since he got pinned at Survivor Series, it's just not the same. You know what I mean? Like it's a little reactionary. Yes, I know. But it's not like that chair match set the world on fire.
Well said. I don't think they've completely just given up on him at all. I mean, I think he still gets a fair amount of TV time. And maybe it's not as strong as a push as when he kind of first showed up. And maybe he is just going to be fed to Rusev, which would be unfortunate because I feel like, they just brought him back. They just kind of threw the jetpack back on him. They're, re-pushing the guy. He's getting over. The crowd's chanting, "Feed me more." So it would be kind of sad to just kind of stop things all at once. But I think, obviously, this matchup is going to be a good indicator. If it's a double DQ or something like that, then you know that they want to protect Ryback, or if they just want to give Rusev a strong win, heading into Fastlane or whatever the heck the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view is going to be called.
Wait, they're changing the name of that?
Yes, it is now going to be called Fastlane. I wonder if they can get like Vin Diesel or someone to be like the guest GM of that pay-per-view.
Yeah, or maybe Eminem and Royce da 5'9" can come perform their song that has the same name. What a terrible idea. What's wrong with Elimination Chamber?
Well, it is the start of 2015, and they've just announced that they changed Elimination Chamber to Fastlane. But
are they changing like Hell in a Cell too?
That's kind of where I was getting at. Is one might think that maybe they're getting away from those match type pay-per-views, so they're not kind of putting themselves in the position where they always have to have that match type at that time of year. So that's the only one we know of as of now. I don't know if they've announced any of the other pay-per-views. I think it's a good start because now maybe we'll just kind of get an Elimination Chamber just randomly sometime during the year, and it might mean a little more. But anyway, let's move on to the third man in the open mic night, and that is Mr. Cesaro, who is the only man to wrestle in a 4-roped ring.
Indeed. The rules of wrestling do not apply in Cesaro's reality. He truly is on a level of his own, in a world where ropes
to his extra. Actual promo. Before I get your thoughts, the one thing I want to say is I could just tell by his demeanor that he was going to, start saying some real things. He was very like a Raven, like kind of, sitting in the corner. He had like the towel on his head, and he just had a mic in his hand, and you kind of felt like you could kind of feel that frustration, and I felt like we were going to get something good. So what were your thoughts on Cesaro's promo?
It was a really good promo, and it felt real. And if you go on YouTube, you can see an interesting clip from the weekend about where he just comes out and is like, just turn off my theme music, it's awful. So on top of that, it felt really real and like, hey, they might actually do something with Cesaro. and then Bad News Barrett came out. Like, it's great that Bad News Barrett is back, and I'm interested to see what they're going to do with him, but it made this whole Cesaro thing feel like, oh, they're just teasing us now. They're not actually going to do anything with the guy.
Yeah, it was a bittersweet moment because we got to see Cesaro starting to feel like, you know, he's actually trying to do something different, to kind of change the way his character is. He's trying to, even though his promo is about not connecting, I think obviously in that same right, he's actually trying to kind of find that connection. And, you know, it was something different. Obviously, he kind of had that botch in the promo, and then he comes out and you know, Barrett comes out and he loses. But I think it's a step in the right direction because, I mean, Cesaro's pretty much just been jobbing for the past few months anyway. At least now he's getting some mic time. But it's a step in the right direction. I guess
from that point of view, it's a step in the right direction.
It did totally
it's more like
kill
a baby step.
It did really destroy it because I was getting into the promo, and then it's like Barrett comes back, and they're not just gonna have Barrett lose right then and there. So
no.
It was a small victory that, you know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
That's a good way to put it.
Which, however many steps forward there was at least 1 step back. Because, you know, how you supposed to take him seriously when he's saying how great he is in the ring if he just kind of gets beat in a short match immediately following that. But nevertheless, good promo. Hope to see more of that. Hope to see more of that frustration. I'm not expecting some sort of CM Punk pipe bomb, but maybe this can actually lead to, you know, a new Cesaro. And it's definitely, you know, he's taking an edge. I kind of like those plain black t-shirts he wears. I know he was wearing some different ones during the house shows. I forget what the other one said.
So is the whole thing with Tyson Kidd just scrapped at this point?
I don't know if that was just a house show thing. Did they do something during Raw last week or anything like that?
I thought it was on some sort of televised / network programming that they teamed together, but maybe I'm making that up.
I was just seeing it, you know, a couple of screenshots on, or like pictures from, you know, Squared Circle Reddit. I'm not sure if they did any like tags on TV, but I know they were doing that during the past week. But nevertheless, good look for Cesaro. Hoping to see more of that. Now let's kind of switch over to Mr. It's me, it's BNB, Mr. Bad News Barrett. What'd you think of the return?
I'm happy he's back. I mean, that was a crippling loss as far as sadness goes when Barrett got hurt, but he's coming back as a face. Is that weird to you?
That's actually the exact question I was going to ask you. That was my follow-up. Yeah, Barrett came back. Usually a return, you come back as a baby face. Who knows if they're actually going to keep him as a face that long? But the crowd really was into the whole bad news thing, but just before he got
How can
injured.
You be a face delivering bad news, though? Like, my head doesn't wrap around it. Like, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. You all like me.
And it's not supposed to be that way.
Exactly.
Well, the thing is, all he has to do is, it kind of becomes more of a comedy thing. He delivers the bad news to the heels. It can definitely work. You can do a lot with that. I would prefer to see him as a heel as well. But, you know, we're not really sure what's going to happen with it. It's very open book right now. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's got a good shot at being a babyface thing, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, chances are this will probably turn into a Cesaro Barrett program, which obviously is going to be some excellent matches, some hard-hitting, physical match types. You know, you get the bull hammers and the uppercuts. So there's no way that that's not a fun match to watch.
But unfortunately, I look forward to watching it on a pre-show.
It really does feel like the pre-show. Would they really do that to Wade Barrett, though, when he just came back?
You never know, though. It could be like a guilty by association style
but
thing.
maybe they have the pre-show match, but they're also in the Rumble. There's a lot of places they can go with it. So we're going to switch over to another thing that happened on Monday Night Raw.
probably the biggest
Yes.
thing. Like, in a pretty big Raw, this is the one that stands out.
We had Edge and Christian as the guest hosts. Brock Lesnar showed up. He confronted John Cena. They had their little moments. And then at the end of the show, we got the pervertedly named Cutting Edge Peep Show, which just sounds as sketchy.
On very different websites, that would mean very different things.
I would not Google that unless you have Safe Search on.
Indeed.
And even then, it would be very questionable. So anyway,
Indeed.
Seth Rollins has his, he's the guest on the show. But then we just come to a situation where Edge is on the ground.
I would call it a hostage situation.
It really was a hostage situation. Basically, Rollins has Edge with his head down on the briefcase, ready to do the curb stomp. We all know Edge has a history of neck injuries that forced him to retire. So Rollins is basically calling out Cena and threatening to basically kill. And he uses the word.
He straight up said the word.
So he basically was threatening to end the life of Edge if Cena would not
bring the authority back.
Thank you.
No problem.
Brain fart.
I'm here for you, buddy.
I appreciate that very much. I'm very tired. Might be a little off my game. But anyway, Rollins doing a true heel-like thing. Very rare that we see some super evil crap coming from somebody.
Totally.
And this is probably one of the darkest type of angles that they have done in a very long time.
And it kind of puts Rollins in that place where he's not just the top heel in the company because he's feuding with the top babyface. He's just the top heel by what he does, because I don't think there's anybody that even comes close to Rollins as far as being a bad guy. Rusev might be the second closest, but that's not even in the same ballpark.
No, absolutely. I mean, Brock Lesnar just kind of beats the crap out of people. Rusev is just, we're, Russia. But Rollins is actually actively doing some heel-like things recently, and this, and just being with the Authority in general, it basically gets you a ton of heat. But obviously, we've heard things about how guys aren't allowed to do a lot of heel-type things anymore. So this was just a breath of fresh air, and I was kind of just stunned at, the intensity and just the kind of dark angle that they did here with just basically threatening a guy's life who has a family, and using that as leverage to get his way. So now we kind of get to his
demand.
Yes,
let's
his
say.
demand. Obviously, we know that Cena had the right, that he is the only one who could bring back the Authority. Now, people use this film term called Chekhov's gun, which is basically if you see a gun in the first act, if you see a shotgun or something, then in the third act of a movie, it's going to go off at some point. Everyone's seen those type of items or whatever it is in a movie. So this was kind of WWE's version of that, with Cena is the only one who can bring back the Authority. So at some point they have that in their back pocket to use whenever they want to bring back the Authority. And they did. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be this soon. I was a little disappointed. It seemed like this was the perfect time for them to do, to threaten it like that, to remind everyone that Cena has that power. But I feel like they should have just kind of teased it and then cut it off and saved it for later.
I disagree, though, because, all right, there's two ways to look at it. There's that way, and then you add the fact that Daniel Bryan announced his return at the same time, like in the same show. Then it starts to make a little more sense, at least in my brain, because now you're kind of picking up from where you left off before Daniel Bryan got hurt. Because now Bryan's back, and now the Authority's back. You know they're going to run into each other eventually, right? So why not just get the that stuff about Cena bringing them back out of the way as fast as you can, and then you just go back into the Authority versus Bryan.
But do we have to have the Authority versus Bryan? Is a victory at WrestleMania 30 not enough for Bryan conquering the Authority. I mean, I was okay with Bryan coming back to a post-Authority world, and I was also looking forward to them doing the whole Authority angle kind of way down the line when we don't expect it, and when it's not fresh on our minds. Like, the Authority losing power is still a very, like, fresh thing. There's only been just a couple of weeks of Raws without it, and now it's it really cheapens Survivor Series. You know, Survivor Series was this big match that really meant something. You had Sting come out there to help end the Authority. And now that doesn't mean as much because, 5 weeks later, it's whatever. Authority's back. So we're back to this status quo. And in that, it's like, it just kind of, it almost makes Ziggler's win not feel as important. Like I said, Sting, maybe this is a way to kind of get Sting back into the picture, but I think it would have meant so much more if it's like, yeah, Sting ended the Authority and for X amount of time, and during his whole WrestleMania run, the Authority had not come back yet. So I don't know, it just would have made it feel a little more impactful. Now it seems like, they're afraid to commit to getting rid of the Authority. They got to bring it back because they got nothing else to do.
Now, normally we save this till the end of the show, but a friend of the show, Ryan Davis at Fight Ryan Fight on Twitter, asked us this exact question. With the Authority back, did the WWE waste the debut of Sting? And I don't really think they did, because Survivor Series was Survivor Series. I mean, eventually, if they're going to have that match, Triple H versus Sting, he's going to have to come back, right? So now, in this position of power, Triple H can force Sting's hand in a way. Now, or he has a way to, like, hunt Sting, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I think there's other ways you could have gone about it, and I see, the thinking there. I think, personally, that it did cheapen Sting's debut. Yes, you need a reason to bring Triple H back, but he also could just come back as a wrestler. He really just couldn't be in an Authority position. And maybe you have the fight with Sting be for the return of the Authority or something like that. So it does kind of cheapen his debut or whatever, but more or less to me, it's more just WWE's kind of lack of commitment to something. Very much like, when, Daniel Bryan was in the Wyatt family for 3 weeks. It kind of felt like that, where it's like, we're going to get rid of the Authority, but then we're not going to commit to that. We want to go back to the way things were.
As much as I disagree, it's very hard to disagree with that point. It's been a common criticism of the WWE,
it's like the
how there's no
syndrome,
long-term plans.
Where you watch an episode of The Simpsons, they buy a horse or something and they race it, and then, but at the end of the episode, everything's back to the
horse is gone.
Yeah, the horse is gone. You're back to the status quo.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like that they do every once in a while. It's like they're afraid to kind of stay outside of their comfort zone. And, I guess they were just kind of treading water with the guest hosts because they knew that they were just going to bring the Authority back. So there was no point in putting in somebody in any type of permanent position. So, we almost should have saw it coming with the fact that they weren't like committing to another GM or something like that.
And from that point of view, if the Authority being back means the end of Larry the Cable Guy and Kathy Lee and Hoda, then so be it. Welcome back.
Yes, that is a positive. We have to take from that is that at the end of the day, if they're not going to put in an actual person to be the GM, not that you even really need a GM. I don't think you have to have one. But at the end of the day, it's probably better to have Triple H and Stephanie, who are worth their salt in the ring and on the mic, than to have Larry the Cable Guy or any of the other random hosts that they have on. No offense to Grumpy Cat, but I think, we rather have
Grumpy Cat's got his thing. I don't think wrestling's part of it.
Yeah, I don't think he needs it. I think he's making, his millions and millions in movie and internet ad revenue and things like that. So the Authority is back. Obviously, this means they're going to have a role in WrestleMania from what it looks like. So besides Sting, do you see the Authority jumping into any other feuds right now? What do you see happening?
Like I said earlier, I think there's going to be something involved with the Authority and Daniel Bryan at some point. That's probably the long-term plan. Maybe something involving Seth Rollins and the Money in the Bank briefcase and the Royal Rumble main event, but who knows about that?
Interesting. Well, we'll have to see. They probably have to revisit Daniel Bryan and the Authority in some light. Whether or not it's going to be WrestleMania remains to be seen. But you have to expect something, especially because he even did mention them in his promo.
To go back a bit, I feel like that there's two possible outcomes to the Royal Rumble. And that's A, Daniel Bryan winning, or B, the Authority screwing Daniel Bryan out of winning, and then Roman Reigns wins.
Do we really want to go down that road again? Of
which road?
Daniel Bryan getting screwed over all the time by the Authority?
I mean, really, with Daniel Bryan, what else is there?
Some high impact matches.
I love him, don't get me wrong. I'm very,
like
very happy he's back. But from a story perspective, what else is there?
Well, we really don't know. We have no idea where they're going to go with Daniel Bryan right now. So it's pretty hard to kind of figure that out. But it's clear that Roman Reigns is the heavy favorite to win. And I don't necessarily think we're going to get a Batista-type heat this time if Reigns wins. I think Reigns is liked enough, although I believe they're going to be in Philadelphia, so the crowd is probably going to be on the smarkier side.
Where were they last year?
Last year? I have no idea, to be honest with you. But, I mean, any crowd, I feel like, would have reacted the same way because Daniel Bryan was over absolutely everywhere. So there might be some backlash to Reigns winning, but I still fully expect Reigns to win, even though I don't think he's quite ready for that spot. So speaking of being ready for that spot, it is time for this week's...
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the pick of the week!
There's no tweet this week, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to do a pick. And speaking of last... Exactly. selloutmode.com/org. Speaking of last year's Royal Rumble, that is this week's pick of the week. I went back and recently watched it, and man, that event is really a jumping off point for a lot of things that happened both this year in wrestling and like what's currently going on. It's really one of the events that changed everything, and just the entire landscape changed. You've got the whole Daniel Bryan and the Rumble Batista thing. You've got Daniel Bryan versus Bray Wyatt, which is my match of the year, and I think should have won match of the year for that, but that's my opinion. And there's just so many good things. There's not a real bad thing to say about this event, and just
really,
it's really good to...
There's not a bad thing to say about the event?
All right, let's look at this.
Like the ending of the match, like Rey Mysterio coming out.
No, but that's not bad. That's not it's good in its own way. Cause really, if you think about it, that's the moment that like the rebellion happened.
It's true. It was the start of rebellion, but I'll never forget the soul crushing feeling when Rey Mysterio's music hit and I realized that Daniel Bryan was not in the Rumble.
It's just not happening. It's a very interesting history piece, and I think it's a good idea to go check that out before this year's Royal Rumble.
Not to mention
just
it was
really
CM Punk's last appearance.
Indeed. It's good. It's a nice refresher, and that's why we're choosing it as our pick of the week.
Thank you, Keith, for that somewhat maybe amazing pick of the week. You can catch that pick of the week on the WWE Network $9.99. You know the drill. So,
and it was in Pittsburgh last year, as I looked up.
And I believe this year's in Philadelphia. Wait, is it? So they would do it in Pennsylvania 2 years ago? Can you check? Can we get the the master
working on it.
computer.
It's in Philadelphia.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania gets the Royal Rumble.
So really, they could be
2
walking
years.
into the exact same situation
Yes, they
were
can.
in last
So it
year.
was a smarter crowd. Makes sense. All right. Well, maybe we'll expect the same results. Either way, I'm looking forward to it. Royal Rumble, aside from WrestleMania, is definitely my favorite pay-per-view of the year. I'm just a huge fan of the Rumble match. The fact that, yes, Reigns is probably the heavy favorite to win, it's still, I feel like it's open enough that other people might have a chance, and it's always fun just to speculate who's going to come out where, and who's going to get eliminated, who's going to get the most eliminations.
Really, more than any other match of the entire year, it's really the biggest anything can happen style match.
No match has more variables than the Royal Rumble,
Indeed.
and that's part of what makes it great. So we are still covering things from Raw after our little mid-show break here, and we got a debut. Yet another member, multiple members from the NXT roster were called up to WWE. That is the Ascension. We've seen a few vignettes before their debut, so we did see that they had some alterations. So
Exactly.
Keith,
Illuminati, what?
Yes. Keith, totally open. The Ascension, your thoughts.
There was a moment during that debut. First of all, as far as show placement, talk about being set up to die. Like, you place the match in between Daniel Bryan announcing he's in the Rumble and Seth Rollins bringing back the Authority. It's basically the Divas match of Raw, if you really want to think about it. But there was a moment during that match where I looked at Conor O'Brien's face and saw the whole, little eye makeup and the Illuminati, and it really makes you appreciate NXT because they're so different. Like, something that works so well in NXT just didn't work on Raw. I don't know what it was, but something felt so off about that debut. They had the new Titantron that was weird, that basically shoved the whole Illuminati thing down your throat. When they did the Fall of Man, it looked different. It didn't look as strong as it usually does. Maybe they were just trying to be cautious. But it was just, everything felt off, and it's not the debut that I wanted to see for the Ascension.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lukewarm debut, and I think, like you said, a lot of that had to do with the placement. The crowd was only kind of hot for a few things during the show, and their loudest pop, obviously, was when Daniel Bryan announced that he was entering the Rumble, and the crowd was going crazy. So to then have the Ascension show up,
It was the blow-off thing to have it.
yes, it really was in that
point.
diva spot where usually it's like the crowd cooler. So that is that's really unfortunate for them. The whole getup, I'm not really digging. It's kind of stupid. It kind of reminds me of when I heard the rumor that the Shield were supposed to come out with actual shields. Like, people just come out with these dumb costume ideas. I don't think you really need that. I mean, I know you're trying to stand out, but I think their whole kind of metal look and stuff is good enough. And to kind of get to why NXT and WWE always feel different, it's really 100% the crowd. It's that NXT crowd. It's a small crowd of hardcore wrestling fans, and they want things to work. It's the crowd helps make things work because they want to enjoy the show. So they help make the show
that,
good.
Though. Because the characters, think about all the people that have debuted and how different they are than their NXT persona, the ones that have failed.
Aside from the costume change, though, is the Ascension really that different?
But that costume change is a really big thing for the Ascension.
If you took off the makeup and everything...
Because they look stupid.
If you took off the makeup and everything, the crowd would
stupid.
be just as lukewarm. I'm pretty sure. I could almost guarantee it with no way of proving it. You really think...
On the technicality there, we'll disagree.
If they looked exactly like they did in NXT and they walked out there, you think that it would be any better?
I think it would, just because you wouldn't have that segment of the audience going like, oh my god, what's on their face?
Yeah, I really think, though, that the NXT crowd goes a long way of... They want to have fun. They want to like things. If they see something that's kind of cool, they immediately embrace it. and they try and find their own ways to make things fun. Like, they found a way to have fun with the Ascension with the whole "ya" chants that they do, and that just kind of snowballed into the Ascension getting super over because they found a way to kind of interact with their matches and all of that. Whereas the Ascension is just kind of coming in here and they just got this weird, like, we're low budget Road Warriors look, and you don't really
did
know
you
what
notice
they're
the
about.
Illuminati there?
Yes, they have the Illuminati thing, but maybe we'll get more of an explanation. But they need a little bit of a wardrobe change. So the perfect way to segue into our next thing about things changing in NXT, there was reports of Adrian Neville being called up soon. Now, obviously, that's great.
Potentially exciting.
It's great.
Like,
we
that'd
saw
be awesome.
Neville. He had kind of one appearance on Monday Night Raw, and he really got a lot of people's attention when
Which was probably the best match this year on Raw.
It was a good match, and the crowd liked it just because, even if most of them didn't know who these people were, they turned a lot of heads with just their impressive movesets. And, nobody got more attention of these NXT matches that they've done than Adrian Neville doing that Red Arrow move, which is just so incredible. And I know a lot of WWE fans have probably never even seen that move done before. So Neville seems like a guy who, he's one of the few guys I wouldn't be too worried about with an NXT transition, just because his moveset is so fun to watch. It's like kind of a Rey Mysterio effect where the crowd would just kind of instantly like them because they play that good underdog, awesome moveset kind of position. But the rumors are, and obviously this is dirt sheets, so take it with a grain of salt, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was completely true. And that is that he's going to get some sort of Mighty Mouse gimmick. Now, Adrian Neville, yeah, he's a smaller guy. He's like 5'10".
Not really, though.
He's a smaller guy height-wise. I guess he's around the same height as Daniel Bryan. But the way the guy looks, he's in incredible shape. He's incredibly athletic. And you don't really look at him as a smaller guy. Now, yes, we see him in NXT where the average height is, less than WWE. But I don't know, you really don't think of him as that small of a guy.
I think the way I think of Adrian Neville is like WWE built Rey Mysterio from the ground up. Like, he's a WWE style wrestler. Mm-hmm. He's built like a brick house, and he's like bigger than Rey, but he can still do everything Rey could do in his prime.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if Vince McMahon had a vision for a high flyer, he would be Adrian Neville. And I know his 90% of his visions are of, a Randy Orton type or something like that, or a Ryback or a Roman Reigns.
Well, if you were to build a superstar from the ground up, JBL says it would look like Randy Orton.
That's exactly why I said Randy Orton, actually, because that's been drilled into my head so many times. But I really think if Vince was to make a high flyer type, he would want him to be someone like Adrian Neville. So it is super disappointing to hear this Mighty Mouse thing, because you just immediately think, okay, it's going to be kind of this goofy thing. Nobody's going to take him seriously, even though this guy is like a professional. He's one of the best high flyers, basically going today. And it just seems like that is destined to just fail right from the get-go.
Yeah, it's most unfortunate.
Have you ever let me say that with actual words. Have you ever even seen Mighty Mouse? I'm familiar with like the theme song or whatever.
Pretty much the same thing. I've probably watched it a couple times at some point in my life, but I know the concept of it, and it's the little guy that, tell me if this sounds like another wrestler, it's the guy that no matter what can always overcome the odds.
So maybe this gimmick won't be so bad for Adrian Neville if he actually does get to overcome those odds.
Mm-hmm. So here's what it made me think of originally. When Kurt Angle first went to TNA, there was like stories that came out about, the whole creative team is really excited to work with Kurt Angle. He can probably bring so much to the table. And then when he goes there, he looks at Chris Sabin and says, hey, this guy really reminds me of Pigpen from Charlie Brown. We should give him a blanket and then make him look like Pigpen. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I have not. That is completely news to me.
I read that somewhere at some point in my life, and that's what it made me remember. Like, oh God, just don't ruin somebody as great as Neville. Like, you have somebody on the roster that can be different. Like, he's like Seth Rollins turned up to 11 as far as in-ring ability goes, and that's an awesome thing. Why would you ruin it with a really stupid gimmick?
Yeah, so like we said, it is the dirt sheets. They're just kind of mulling over ideas. We really hope this isn't true because you can do a lot with Neville and he can be a very serious character. He doesn't have to be this goofy thing.
Just keep the whole man that gravity forgot thing. That's more than he needs. Put it on a t-shirt. Boom, you've got everything.
Exactly. So as we move on, this is the final show of 2014 for Byte That. And I just kind of wanted to take a moment to, we already did our Bitey Awards, best and worst, but just to kind of get any final thoughts on 2014, just we can kind of look back at it as a whole for WWE, any things maybe we missed. I don't know if you saw last week's episode, Keith. You don't have to answer that, so.
I'm not answering that question.
But just anything, you think we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on?
From my point of view, I think that when we look back, 2014 is going to be one of the most important years in wrestling history. It's one of the things that everything changed this whole year. As we mentioned earlier, the crowd rebellion, that basically, it's one of the first times, well, I can't really say that because of the whole Rock thing, that the crowd forced somebody to turn from face to heel. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing in wrestling, period, the streak ended this year. They changed the entire landscape of the company by having the titles go away. And Sting. Frickin' Sting is in the WWE now on WWE television. Like, those are just some of the things that happened this year.
Not to mention CM Punk leaving and then...
Exactly. That whole scenario.
His whole podcast thing. Vince McMahon on a podcast. Like, what a big year in wrestling. Was it earlier this year or was it last year that Triple H cut that promo like things are changing? It's going to be the reality era. I really don't remember. It might have been early this year though.
But it really felt like this was a year of change in wrestling. Some good, some bad, but if you look at wrestling early this year and wrestling where it is right now, it's very different.
It's very true. We also had the breakup of the Shield. That's another thing. To me, the
breakup of the Wyatts.
Yeah, to me, this year could really be summed up in, like Keith said, so many things changed, yet week to week, it didn't feel like it. There was a lot of week to week where it was like, oh, it's the same old.
A lot of broad strokes.
Yes, a lot of same old this, same old that. But now that we're at the end and we're looking back, we're like, holy crap. A lot of stuff really did happen. A lot of major stuff. When a 20-year sort of angle ends, that's a pretty big deal.
That's
when a guy
no big deal.
never stepped foot in WWE and most people thought it would never happen, that's a big deal. When CM Punk just quits.
And the biggest deal of all,
yeah.
The network launched this year.
Exactly. We have the network launching as well. NXT starting its big events. That was also at the start of this year. So really looking back, even if it didn't feel like it week to week, we had a lot of things change. So lastly, I just kind of want to open up to kind of free-form discussion. So I went on that trip to Puerto Rico for Juan's wedding. Keith unfortunately couldn't make it. But it was a good time. It was good to meet Juan in person. I had briefly met him many years ago. We only hung out for a small amount of time. But it was cool, too, to hang out with Juan in person. Also,
and much like that vehicle, it just passed us by.
Yes. But they had a very lovely wedding, which, of course, us being the Byte That podcast, we had to insert a little bit of wrestling into Mr. Juan Court's wedding. There was actually a moment where we brought out a wrestling cake for Juan. After the regular cake had been presented, we brought out a wrestling cake. Me, Jamie, who you saw on the show 2 weeks ago, and another friend of Juan's, Anthony, was there. We all put on masks that we found at Walmart, which was a Sin Cara mask, a Kane mask, and a Rey Mysterio mask. We came out to the Shields theme, presenting his wrestling cake, which had a bunch of it had like generic wrestling figures on the cake. There was like a ghetto Kane, and then like a weird Ryback / Sin Cara guy.
It was Khan and Ryblock.
Yes, there was one that was clearly a Kane ripoff, and the other ones were just kind of weird looking. But anyway, they were really funny. I think Juan actually tweeted a few pictures of them, not knowing they were going to be on his cake. He found the pro wrestling figures at a store and didn't realize that they'd end up on his cake. But that was fun, and Juan got a kick out of it. But it was a great wedding, great trip. We went to some caves and some other areas.
You went to the Cradle from Goldeneye, didn't you?
We went to the Cradle from Goldeneye.
That's dope.
It was pretty cool. They also filmed the movie Contact there as well. Well, they did like a scene or two there. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff. We went to Old San Juan, which is a big touristy area. But it was cool to see, just the neighborhood in which Juan lives in, different culture, good food. It was a good time. And of course, it was fun to record a live edition of the podcast kind of in person. Wish you could have been there, Keith. I'm not going to make you feel any more guilty. But it was cool to do a video edition.
Just send me down the depression road a little more. No problem.
We hope to really do some more things like that down the road. Obviously, us and 3 separate areas on the Western Hemisphere. We can't do that as often as we'd like to, but we definitely want to do more things like that down the road when we can save up some money here and there to do that. So we, appreciate everyone who tuned over to YouTube to check those video editions out. We had a lot of fun with it. We also recorded some kind of round table type of discussions. I think we're calling it the square round table or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but we got a bunch of footage there, which we're going to be kind of rolling out on our YouTube channel, which is of course youtube.com/ByteThatCast. Well, let me say that again, /ByteThatCast.
What was that? There we go.
Yeah. Keith, any final thoughts on 2014 or just anything as a whole before we close out the year?
Heck of a year. The WWE almost feels like it's in a rehab state right now, where I hope they don't fumble their recovery. And as far as us, I look forward to another fun, exciting year of doing that which we love, which is talking about professional wrestling.
Exactly. And of course, this was the first full calendar year of Byte That, so that was also another exciting thing. So it is time to close out the show for 2014, and we want to thank everyone for listening to another edition of the Byte That podcast. Of course, we got to get through our plugs. Check out our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button, youtube.com/ByteThatCast, where you can check out this podcast as well as many other videos. Like I said, we're going to be rolling out those kind of roundtable discussion videos we did. We did a lot of interesting ones. You can already catch one that's up on YouTube right now about undefeated streaks. So you can check that out right now if you haven't already. And in the next few weeks, we'll have things just on open discussions, such as I know we did one on, creating our own storyline. And we also talk about Rusev, which I believe will be coming out next week. So plenty of content that will be rolling out, video content. It was a lot of fun to record. Don't forget to also follow us on Twitter @ByteThatCast, as well as checking us out on Facebook, facebook.com/ByteThatCast. Don't forget, you can always tweet us questions as well for the show, and we'd be happy to answer them. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in to the Byte That podcast. We had a great 2014, and we will see you next year.
Bye-bye.